going to talk about parenting. And not last week, a couple weeks ago, Pastor Eric did a message on marriage, and he started it out by sharing our credentials as a married couple, which don't know that I really thought about when I started writing this, but it feels really valid, right? Because why would you listen to him about marriage? And furthermore, and possibly a way more valid question, why would you listen to me about parenting? Because I'm going to tell you, I am preaching to myself today as much as I am preaching to all of you. But I do have some parenting credentials I can share, right? You may have noticed this shirt that I'm wearing. It says boy mom here. And then the back, it's like a little different. And I feel like this gives you insight into everyday life. I don't know that any of my boys calls me ma, right? But what's the next one on there, Eric? Mama. That would be Rigby every time. Mama, mama, can I have water? Mama, I need this. Mama, mama, mama. And then the next one is mom. That's actually Balin, my 11-year-old. Hey mom, hey mom, hey mom, all the time. And then the final one, bruh. This would be Marvel. He almost exclusively, my kindergartner almost exclusively talks to me as Hibra. Can you, bruh, when he finishes a video game, whatever it is. So this is real life, this shirt here. I also thought it might be good if I just wore like my mom uniform, right? Like messy bun. I didn't have a Starbucks cup prop until Missy brought me a Starbucks cup this morning. So this is just like my mom uniform, okay? Messy bun, no makeup, living on a prayer, that kind of thing. So, but we have 3 boys running around, right? So it's like chaos all the time. And then we also had a miscarriage, so we've experienced some loss in our parenting journey and worked through that as well. I have survived pee everywhere because, again, all boys in my house except for me. Lots and lots of eye rolls, picky eaters, sibling squabbles. My living room basically is just WWE as much as we really try to say go somewhere else, and so much more. But my real proof, my real credentials is sitting right here because this is our oldest, Balin. He's 11. And here's the thing. He's in church. He's like mostly happy to be here. He doesn't entirely hate us. He is too cool for us, though. He is very smart. He plans to be a NASA engineer, and all signs are currently pointing to like that's achievable for him. I don't know about you. I was not good at math. Don't know where that came from. It was not our genetics. He's student council president. Beyond that, he's a good friend, a protector. He has the biggest imagination I've ever seen, and he uses that to create like some brilliant stories. He's even written a book, and because I'm his mom, he won't let me read it, but if you ask him, you probably can. Unfortunately, I think Balin got this way despite my parenting skills, instead of because of my parenting skills. I think we really looked out. As Eric mentioned last week, we were married in October, and we found out the next January, so 4 months later, that we were pregnant. And if you clocked our timeline when Eric did it, that was almost exactly 1 whole year that we had known each other. So having a baby seems like a really good plan, right? I was 22 years old. And if I'm being really honest, I was still like playing house, I didn't really know how to be an adult. But yeah, we added a baby to that and it was great. And when he was born, we were in the hospital and they're like, okay, you can go home. So we took our baby out in the carrier and we get to the car and we get him all clicked in and we went through that first like, is this car seat correct thing, and we sit down and we like buckle ourselves in and we look at each other and we're like, what do we do now? Like what happens now? And I wish I could say that that was the last time I was completely clueless, and it definitely has not been in our parenting journey, because in reality, in parenting, I feel that way a lot. And so I read verses like this one that I'm going to read here in a second, and I feel like maybe I'm doing something wrong, right? It says, Psalm 127:3, children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from him. I think for a lot of my parenting career, what it feels like God has gifted me is anxiety and frustration. Anyone else with me? Yeah, okay. Children don't always feel like a gift. On last Monday, I was like having a really hard time sleeping, and I finally wound down. It was like 2 a.m., got to sleep, and then I wake up at 5 a.m., and there's like this absolute blood curdling cry coming from the living room, right? And it's that one that like your heart kind of stops. And I race down the steps. By the way, Eric heard nothing, passed out, still snoring, completely fine. And I hit the bottom of the stairs, and I'm expecting to find like a broken arm, or like we have these chairs that the kids could get, like sometimes they don't pay attention, they get caught or something, like trapped or broken or whatever. What it actually was is Marvel, our 5-year-old, sitting on our, beautiful leather couches in a pile of his own vomit, which I don't do great with anyways. And I'm thinking, this is a gift. Like this right here, I really could have done without a lot of the bodily fluids that are involved in parenting. And if they just like had to be there, if they were necessary, I'm just saying, God, you could still do this. Can I get some sort of magic machine that just like sucks whatever it is up, and I don't have to deal with it? That would be really, really great. I feel like, all jokes aside, the reality is that parenting is really tough. And it's always been tough. But today, our world is so volatile around you, and our kids have access to it so quickly at their fingertips any given second. They're surrounded by a million voices telling them who and how to be, and it's hard. So let me ask you this. I need to get a good show of hands. How many people in the room are parents? Awesome, awesome. Keep them up for just a second for me. Now, keep your hand up only if you have all this parenting thing figured out. Yeah, if you notice. Okay, well, that's a lie. Everyone's hands went down. Everyone's hands went down, okay? None of us have it figured out. Parents, put your hand back up if you often feel overwhelmed in parenting. Okay, take a second and look around. This is you are not alone. Okay, you are not alone. You can put your hands down now. Parenting is overwhelming, especially if you want to do it right. So it requires a village. That was the point of today's child dedication, right? That was the point of it. And if you're in the room and you're not a parent, or maybe your parenting journey is like farther along, you might be tempted at the moment to tune out of this message. Please don't. Please don't. Because you are needed by the families in the room. You are needed by those beautiful children that are screaming back there but learning about Jesus. Because while a million voices are telling our kids who and how to be, their parents are only one or two trying to be the loudest in the room. So we need you to be our village. So tune in, because every single person in this room has important things to hear today. So, with that being said, when my family gets together, we do something we call parenting by proximity, right? And this means there's a lot of children running around. And what this means is that if the children need something, gets hurt, ask for something, needs to be corrected or disciplined in some way, the adult that is nearest to them is now responsible for that. Notice I did not say the parent closest to them, the adult. And sometimes this even stretches to like the older teenager closest to them is responsible to assist with that, not send them to their parent. Not, it takes a village to raise a child. If you've been around Dwell during setup ever beforehand, we have to move a lot of things around in this building, and you've seen, or like our house, we're practicing the way, you may have seen this parenting by proximity in practice a little bit. to be honest, if you have a kid around here, I can almost guarantee Eric and I have disciplined them in some way. We have parented them. We are not shy about it. We are kind about it, but we are not shy. And I hope that every single adult in this room has felt not only permission, but seen it as a necessity to parent any one of these wild Wallace boys if they needed it and I wasn't there. Because I cannot raise three wild feral boys into amazing, loving, caring men of God without you. I can't do it. On the other side of that, I need you to be there for me because I mess up often. Like I said, I'm preaching to myself today. So, unlike Pastor Eric gave the advice with marriage of start over and try again, with kids, they remember too much. They don't like you kind of can't do that. You can't like toss the first pancake out and just do it again. It's more like this. We have to keep growing, keep going, keep growing. So this is what our kids are doing. They are going, they are growing, they are always moving forward. And one of the most frustrating things about parenting is that as soon as you figure something out, your kids moved on. And if I'm being really honest, I think this is why some of us keep having children. Because, like, you figured it out. You figured it out, and that one moves on, and you're like, well, I have another one, and now I'm going to be pro. The problem is, by the time that one gets there, you've completely forgotten everything about what happened right here. All of it. So we always have to keep going, keep growing. The kids are always evolving. They are developing physically, emotionally, verbally, and mentally at a rate that is astounding. And as a parent, we have to take the time to understand where our kids are and what in that moment, in that phase, they are currently capable of. We've gotten caught so many times in trying to discipline our 2-year-old like they're a 7-year-old and getting frustrated that it's not working. Like they don't have logic. They don't, I don't have you ever met a 3-year-old? They're not logical human beings. Go talk to Rigby if you need some practice. Um, but it is impossible to be an expert on all of this at all times. There's too many things. If you're like me, I have 3 of them and each one of them is in a different phase. And so I can't know exactly where they are at all times. And I don't do the 8 million other things I need to do in life, like feed them and, all this stuff. And so I like to rely on tools. Anyone else like tools? Okay, so did anyone have when you were pregnant that app that's like your baby's a watermelon this week? Well, I don't know if they ever actually get to watermelon, but it feels like it. You're a grape today. And it tells you like what their brain is doing, like how they're developing, what you can expect like for yourself and what's going on with them. And I don't know about you, but that eased so much of my anxiety because I knew like what was going on, what was normal, what wasn't normal. So I have found an app similar to that, but like this side of the belly. And I'm very excited to share it with you. I'm actually going to put a QR code up here. It's called Parent Q, and it's actually a Christian based company. So feel free if you want to download it. There's a free version, but if you do want to pay $5 a month, it will give you all the like developmental things that your kid is going through right now. But I do have a spoiler alert. This company, they do this really cool thing, and they believe that you have like a set amount of time to massively influence your kid, right? And so you'll see when I logged in and put Balin's birth date in, you'll see it says you have 341 weeks until they move on to what's next. Yep. Yeah, she's old. You don't want to put that in. It's it was it was a little terrifying of like, and it's average of when children grow up and move away from home. But the thing that they understand is that every single phase in a kid's lifetime is a specific unique time that you can leverage distinct opportunities to influence their future. And so you can look at this as like how I did when I opened it. And I was like, oh no, time is running out. And I just flipped to Rigby and I was like, okay, great. We got, he's like in the 700s. We had some time with that one. But, or you can say, I have 341 weeks to be the biggest voice in my kid's life. It was 341 weeks to make sure he knows he is loved and cared for and comforted. And not that any of that is going to go away when he goes off to college or, I don't know, ends up in space, apparently. Talk about terrifying for a mom. But whatever it is he goes on to do, not that I'm going to lose that altogether, but it's different, right? When he's an adult on his own. And so I think it's really cool, but it tells us that as parents, we have to pay attention and we have to work on playing the long game. This is not a right now, today thing. We have to play the long game because we live in a world of all kinds of parenting styles. If you don't think this is true, ask any woman who's been pregnant how many rules there are on what she's allowed to eat while she's pregnant. So many rules, and so many different thoughts and opinions. Any mom whose child has ever had a cold, or dads too. I think dads get this too, but it's, societally moms hear that more. I also think seek that out a little more. But there's all these parenting styles, and every single generation has kind of had its distinct style, methodology of parenting, right? And so that leads us to a point where even in this room today, if you look at the style of parenting you were raised with, it may be one of these. So those of us still living today were likely parented by we walked to school uphill both ways, barefoot in the snow kind of parent, right? Or the one who said, children need to be seen and not heard. Or maybe you were raised by those, you can do anything you dream kind of parent, right? Or the most recent parenting styles actually started to divert, and it is either a helicopter hovering parent or an is anyone bleeding parent, okay? And all of this leads to an overwhelming amount of conflicting advice on how to be a parent. But there's one thing that every single one of these parenting styles has in common, and the prevailing parenting method over the years in the US has been quick fix parenting. So quick fix parenting, it looks like this, and some of it may sound familiar. It's yelling so that your kid will immediately listen to you and change their behavior. Quick fix parenting looks like participation trophies so no one's feelings get hurt. Quick fix parenting looks like forced abstinence instead of teaching moderation and responsible use. This kind of parenting occurs when we don't know how to fix the underlying issue, so we just focus on the behavior immediately in front of us. See, without a plan, every single parent will default to quick fix parenting instead of dealing with the real issues at play. We forget to play the long game. We'll keep handing out Band-Aids instead of cauterizing the bleed and permanently stopping it. But what we need to do instead is called intentional parenting. We have to make a plan. So how do we do that? Again, I am all about resources, and I love this quote from a book by Doug Fields. Just the title of the book is Intentional Parenting, 10 Ways to be an Exceptional Parent in a Quick Fix World. Yes, please. Thank you. But it says your first step is to believe that you are vital to your child's development. And you're up to the task. And 3 things here, all 3 of them, to believe that God will be at your side every single moment. If you are not currently viewing yourself as the greatest influence in your child's life, you're missing it. You're losing those weeks. Our kids are always watching us. It's like you have a surveillance camera on you 24/7. But I think we're real concerned about is Big Brother watching me, and we forget about these tiny little shadows that are watching every single thing we do. They're soaking in every single action you take, every face you make, every decision you have. And when they're little, when they're babies, they're doing that and they're learning how to laugh, right? Because they saw you do it and they start to attach the sound to the smile and to the feeling that goes with it. And that's how they learn. When they get older, this means they watch you get angry and they understand it's okay to be angry too. Can I get vulnerable with you guys for a second? Share a story that I'm not super proud of. So, a couple weeks ago, we got an email from Balin's teacher, and throughout the day, he'd had a couple different moments that he was really, really angry. And more than once, he'd been caught by some of the teachers telling someone else to F off. And although we've dealt with some cussing over the years, it hasn't been, and some anger problems, it hasn't been to this extent. And we certainly haven't gotten an email from the teacher that always is on his side, like always gives him grace, thinks he, is such a great kid. And so something was off, right? Something was off with this. And Eric had an opportunity to talk with Balin a little more that evening and ask, why he thought it was okay. Ooh. And he said, well, I heard Mom the other day. Because a couple days before that, Eric and I had been in the kitchen and we were having what was a discussion, right? A discussion, and it turned to like an argument, and it turned to anger, and I got so angry, so overwhelmed, and I snapped. And I, had this temper tantrum around the house that would make my 3-year-old really proud. I was stomping around and had a string of expletives come out of my house or come out of my mouth. And I realized that I couldn't regulate, I couldn't control. And so I was like, I need to go upstairs. I got to, get away. And even though our kids weren't in the room and I couldn't see them, they could hear it. They could feel it. They could feel the shift in the whole house. I was so angry. I went up the stairs that I was unable to regulate myself. And as soon as I was away from everybody, I swung out and I hit the wall. There's a dent in our wall I now have to walk by every day. And frankly, I'm really lucky I didn't break my finger with that. They didn't see it, but they heard it and they felt it. And if I acted that way, it's okay for him to act that way, no matter the environment. Because I am their example of how to behave. If my kids are watching me, good behavior has to start with me. Their behavior is so often more about you than it is about them. Every parent in this room has messed up. Every parent in this room will mess up again in the future. You just will. We have to give ourselves permission to learn and grow the same way we expect our kids to learn and grow. But remember, and this is what I forgot that day, you are always the adult in the room. You are always the adult. So I think we all would agree that it's reasonable that Balin needed to go to school and he had some apologies to give, right, to these other students or to these teachers that he wasn't listening to. I think the thing we often forget is I owed my boys apologies. I owed them apologies and an explanation that I knew how I had behaved was wrong. That I knew the stress that it caused them was wrong. That the extent of my reaction wasn't what I hope for myself, and it's not what I hope for them. When we mess up as parents, we have to own it and we have to apologize. We can't brush it under the rug or say because they didn't see it or they didn't say anything about it, it didn't happen. We have to apologize. And I think what we've been taught is so something like this, when we mess up, we own it and apologize. We hear that as a rule, right? Like it's just a fact, it's a thing we do now. And our reaction is when the rule is broken to discipline it. We actually need to start viewing things like this as boundaries. And when the boundary is crossed, we create guidance. There's a lot of confusion around this, in particular in Christian culture, in church culture. And it comes to a couple of verses, but what we need to understand is biblical discipline is about guidance, not punishment. Biblical discipline is about guidance, not punishment. And there's One verse in particular that has created a lot of confusion around this over the years, and unfortunately, this verse and the way it's been taken out of context has justified varying degrees of abuse in Christian homes over the years. It reads this way. Proverbs 13:24 says, "Those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them." I think when we read that, in our current cultural understanding, the word rod makes us think of, like, I'm going to go get the switch off the tree, or my dad had a paddle, or we had wooden spoons, whatever it is. That's what it brings to mind. And it seems to condone physical consequences as a form of discipline. The problem is, this is not at all what a rod was used for in in biblical times, in cultural context. Let's look at another verse that tells us about a rod. It says Psalms 23:4. "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me." The rod was a tool of the shepherd. It was never used for punishment. It was used for guidance. As the herd of sheep is moving, if they veered off course, the shepherd would use his rod to reach out and push them back into protection and comfort. Disciplining in anger is going to create an angry kid. Nagging or scolding or consistently being on your kids creates perfectionism and resentment. When your kids see you lose control, they start to lose respect. All of these actions are quick fix parenting. They may bring about the temporary result that we want. We've all been in the store and our kid is screaming bloody murder, and everybody's looking at you, and you're like, "What do you do?" And you yell, and they get quiet, and then it teaches you as the parent that works. But it's quick fix parenting. We're not playing the long game. Over time, if you continue to discipline out of anger, your kids will stop hearing the words and they will only hear your angry spirit. Some of us, though, anger may not be our issue. There's another side of the coin. Some of us, we give too much. We give in. If you're not sure this is you, I have one very important question for you to consider. How do you use Band-Aids in your household? Are Band-Aids for something that's bleeding? Are they for something you don't want to get infected? Or are they to prevent tears and arguments? If they're tears and arguments, you might be a give-in parent. You might be a quick fix, make it easy right now parent. The problem is, you are definitely helping them be more comfortable right now in the immediate moment, which feels good, right? Like, we want to love and comfort our kids. What you're actually teaching is not to manage your physical and emotional pain, which in the long term is going to really mess them up. So, what do we do? Again, kids need to be given boundaries that are attached to consequences in order to learn responsibility and self-sufficiency. So, boundary, consequence. Intentional parenting requires a hand of discipline, but from a heart of love, because it's the only way to raise children who become wise, competent, and thoughtful adults. Pastor Aeric, he introduced to us in the marriage sermon The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. And one thing I love about this book is that there's several different versions of it depending on the setting you're in. And there's one that is the 5 Love Languages of Children. And he says that every child is waiting to be filled with love. He has this quote that I love. "When a child really feels loved, he will develop normally. But when the love tank is empty, the child will misbehave. Much of the misbehavior of children is motivated by the cravings of an empty love tank." We all want our kids to misbehave less and develop normally, right? Any parent in the room saying no to that? This is like the dream. Quit misbehaving and grow up good, right? Grow up on time or better than that. So, I have some tips of how to do this. How do we start this journey? And honestly, I could preach an individual message as I've been doing this research on each and every one of these things. So I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. But if you are looking for more resources, again, that Parent Q app, the book, The 5 Love Languages of Children, or the book, Intentional Parenting by Doug Fields, I'll send you any of those. I also, in prepping for this message, did a 5-day devotional on the free YouVersion app on that intentional parenting book. But how do we fill our kids' love tank? So this is like the question we're going to land on. It's the most important thing. If their misbehavior comes from not feeling loved, how do we make sure they feel loved? There's 4 things we can do. We can be their number one fan. We can show up. We can create memories. And we can build our own village. So, be their number one fan. All right, Pastor Aeric outed me. Words of affirmation is not my love language. I am not good at it. When we took the test, I scored a 1. It's out of like 35 or 40. I scored a 1. And so this is a thing. I have a really bad habit of speaking more on the poor behaviors of my children rather than their amazing qualities. And if you've heard me talk about my kids, I can almost guarantee you have a memory of me saying something not nice about them in the guise of expressing my own frustration, right? Here's the thing. Sometimes they hear that. Sometimes you repeat that, and it creates, like, in yourself, a lack of respect for your children, a lack of love for your children. So here's what I'm doing better on this. And I've been working on it since I started writing this message. So we're very much in progress, but we're doing better every day. I'm going to work on seeing and saying it positive. So what does that look like? Rigby loves to color on our walls. It is great. If you come to our house, you'll see some really beautiful artwork on the walls. And that is how I can see it and say it positive, is that Rigby is a beautiful artist and loves to decorate our walls so everyone who comes to our house enjoys it. I'll look to catch my kids doing things right and then be sure to tell them about it. So this week, Marvel, he's like 5 going on 15 for sure. And he's got that like teenager attitude going on. And this week he had a day that he just listened really good. And I never got that attitude. And as we were laying down for bed, I said, "Hey, bud, I really loved how you listened today. I really loved how we got to interact together and have more quality time together because you just did such a good job and you were a great big brother today." The other thing we can do is say it beyond their performance. So much feedback in our world is hinged on either performance-based or shame. It's actually really hard to naturally discover feedback that is not in one of those things. So I have not gotten good at this yet because I'm a very performance-based human. But the example they gave in the book was, instead of something like, "Hey, I love that you hit that home run. You did so good." You could say something like, "I really enjoyed watching you play baseball with your team and seeing how much you love this sport and being a part of the group." That tells your kid that you were there, you were present, you affirm them, but it is not based on something they did or did not achieve. Okay, the second thing is show up. We have to give our kids our time. Here's the thing, Pastor Aeric, he's the king of these little like sticky statements, right? And so he thought of this like a month ago, and it has stuck with me ever since. You can be a present parent without being a pleasant parent. You can be in the room physically, but not engaged, not a part of what they're doing, not supportive. And we have these, little devices everywhere and all these screens that disengage all of us. It's about being engaged emotionally. See, your presence is going to require personal sacrifice. Whatever's on that phone, you need to put it down. Sometimes this is, I know for me, for several years, I was at work instead of at home for a long time. Sometimes this is the hobbies, or honestly, guys, I hate to admit this, sometimes this is sleep. Sometimes you just need to stay up a little bit longer with your kids and have that moment. You see, we have a really great model of this. God so loved the world, he sent his one and only son. God modeled this overwhelming type of presence for us by sending his son to be physically present with us in flesh and blood. So our challenge is to be as intentional with our kids as Jesus was with all of humanity in his time on earth. No big deal, right? We can all live up to that. Okay, create memories. No place should represent the joy of God's kingdom more than our homes and our families. We have to be the safe spaces. We can do this. We can cultivate joy in big things like vacations, but also in really small things like board games or reading that book that they have. Kids are wired to crave adventure. So you can do something like a scavenger hunt or an ice cream date, and they're going to love it. I challenge you to make new family traditions. This is actually an easy way to create a memory. So the author Doug Fields of Intentional Parenting, the way he does this is they celebrate Groundhog's Day like to the nines in their house. What a weird holiday to pick. He dresses up like a groundhog every year and like picks his kids up from school. And it's this ridiculous thing, but they have this memory and it's this tradition and they expect it and they love it. And I don't remember what he said that they go do, but it's just ridiculous and it's unique to their family, right? What are your family traditions? Because I think the thing that we really get caught up in some of our busy lives and we forget about is to make fun. You're going to have to schedule fun. You have to build it in. So my challenge here is, do you have dedicated time that your entire family is spending together and intentionally creating memories? What do you do with that? If you don't have it, when you leave here, find it. Put it on the calendar for this week. You don't have to know exactly what you're going to do yet, but just pick an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is. Pick it, put it on the calendar, and stay true to it. And then once you make the memories, make sure you capture them because some of that is so much fun just coming back and revisiting them. When we go, Balin was the first grandchild. And when we went over to Eric's parents' house in town here, well, on Eric's side, who's the first grandchild, we went over to their house. And when he was little, they had this thing they called the Balin channel. And he would just sit because it was like their screensaver just of their Apple photos. And new grandparents, like 98% of them were of Balin. And so he would just sit and watch like the memories of him or him and his family, like bathing in the sink with Gigi or reading a book with Papa, these little moments that were captured. And he loved it. He loved it. So make the memories and then capture them. Worship team, you can go ahead and come forward. The last thing you have to make sure you do is to build a village. No one can do this alone. No one can do this alone. But it's even more than that. As I was preparing for this message, I read a couple of messages on parenting by Craig Rochelle of Life Church, and this quote really caught me. You can gift your children a community worth having. It's true that you can't pick your kids' friends, but you can influence the environments you put them in. In our home, this has looked like us selecting a different set of godparents for each one of our children. And then we've cultivated the relationships with those people so that our kids know they have an extra trusted adult, an extra safe space, an extra fun person to be around when they need something. But it's also looked much more simple than that. It's looked like being friends with other families. It's looked like doing shared birthday parties together or watching WrestleMania matches or frankly, attending the same church together and seeing each other every week on a regular basis. All this parenting advice, none of it is groundbreaking, right? There's nothing in here that you could have said, I never would have gotten there by myself. It's not rocket science, but it is simple ideas that we have to do consistently if we want to build strong families. God wants you to be a successful parent. He wants you to be a wise steward of the gift that your children are, and he wants those things significantly more than you want them, even. So he sent us a helper. He sent us the Holy Spirit to walk by our side. He's given us an example in how he loves us. God is often referred to as our Father, and I know for me, having problematic parent relationships growing up, I rejected that for a really long time. But God loves you like a father. We can look to his example to how to parent our kids. We can look to how he treats us when we go to try to figure out how to treat our kids. Because being a parent is significantly more than giving a birth to a child and meeting their needs as they grow up. In Hebrew, which is one of the languages of the Bible, the word for parent is horam. It means teacher. Biblical parenting is about educating and empowering our children with the knowledge and tools that they need to live healthy, wholesome, and independent lives. Parents, God is with you. He's part of your village. He says, "Come to me, all who are weary, and I will make your burden light." This church is with you. That's what we did today in these child dedications. That's what we can continue to develop and grow and be better with, but you are not alone. Let's go ahead and stand today as we get ready to close. We're going to thank God for the gift of our children, and we're going to ask for his help to be intentional parents as we continue to guide them as they grow. Let's go ahead and sing.